Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep, he is. Oh, it is. I was hoping he was. One can hope not. It's Well, welcome everyone, and I say everyone in the broadest possible sense. I guess everyone's still on Thanksgiving vacation, but thank you for being here. Let's start with prayer, and then we'll jump into to what we're going to think through today. Father God, thank you for the chance to be here. Thank you for the chance to be together and think about what it means to be someone who tries to make a difference in your name in a broken world. Father, give us a sense of your presence with us, not only in this moment and in our worship hour following this, but as we move through our lives. Help us to remember that if we are called by Christ's name, we are his representatives in this world. Give us a sense of direction. And as we, in this class, study through a set of people who sought in their lives to serve your purposes and to hear your call and to, even if reluctantly, answer your call, help us to learn from them how to be doing that in our lives. Lord, thank you for this last week, for many a chance to be with family, for many of us a reflective time, and pray that has been a time that is part of how you shape us. Once again, we give you thanks for this day. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, I have the books of life here, and last week I don't think they got passed around, so no one got credit. Well, all right, well, that's not exactly right. You know, it's like someone said, oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, I heard something. Anybody remember the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald? Oh, yeah. I was, well, the song, I vaguely remember the event, and anyway, long story short, yeah, the Gordon Lightfoot song made it popular, but you know, I heard something the other day. They were talking about the 50th anniversary and talking about the fact that there are 29 people on board. And so there's the speculation about, quote unquote, what really happened. And they said, you know, only 30 people know, because it's the 29 crewmen and God, and nobody's talking. So, you know. So, hey, God does know if you were here last week, even if you didn't get to sign the book of life. So, all right. Thinking about some biblical heroes reconsidered, and the comic book is not just for comic relief, but just the idea of we are, just as Americans, tend to be tuned into this kind of superhero kind of idea. And I wanted to kind of take that and say, well, wait a minute, what really makes someone a hero? As we get started, would like for you with a conversation partner, if you will, think about this. Have there been events that have totally changed the direction of your life? Have there been events in your life that have totally changed the direction of your life? If you would, with a conversation partner, take about a minute. I'll watch the clock. And if you're comfortable to share maybe a little bit with whoever you're talking to about what that event was or what happened, I mean, you could answer the question yes, and then put a period at the end of that sentence, or no, and put it. But if you want to share, that would be great too. So anyway, if you would take a moment with someone else on that. Events that have totally changed the direction of your life.
Hello, Greg.
Hello. Hello. I'm good.
Everybody's like me, a little late today.
No.
Or they're gone still. Dan was asking about somebody today, and I said, well, they went out of town for the holidays, which we did too, but we had kids flying out yesterday, so we had to come back.
Yeah.
Although I did consider letting them come back and staying at the bar.
I bet. About 10 more seconds. All right, so events that have totally changed the direction of your life. Not putting anyone under obligation, but anyone want to stick your nose above the wall and anything that you care to share, something that totally... Your wife has the best one. Well, normally we don't confess for others, Dennis, but if it's a good story, then I'm all for it. Marrying him, which explains why he wanted to bring that up. It's all so clear to me now, Dennis. Yeah, good point, Sue. She did not say how it changed. Anyone else? Something that again, not going to force anyone to share anything, but. Curious how some things happen. I think, what's that? Yeah, Raymond? I think for a lot of folks, something like, I figured someone would say when you get drafted, that sort of changes the direction of your life. Maybe I heard a story the other day about someone who took a class just because they had to. In college, it was some sort of a requirement, or it was like you have to take one of these 3 classes and the other 2 were closed or something, so they take this class. And that ends up being what they do for the rest of their lives. Just something unexpected like that. Yeah, Danny. Okay, yeah. So a health crisis. So wait. One side was feeling different, so you go to the gym and pick up 45-pound plates to see if one side felt different. What did you find out? It did. Okay, well. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thank you for sharing, Danny. The idea of even as you were like not sure what was going on medically, just that sense that God's got this. I love that. This idea that something can happen that just changes the way we see our lives or just moves us in an unexpected direction. So I'm not even gonna ask circumstances there, but it changed your life. Yeah, most parents keep going until they get the perfect child, or run out of time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We're not even going to ask Jeff how it changed your life. Good, bad, indifferent. Oh, in this class, and this hopefully will kind of all make sense in a moment when we get into it. But we're trying to think about people who were what we might call godly heroes, people who helped to put God and His power on display in their lives, someone who made a difference for God's purposes, from God's perspective. And our godly hero du jour is Charlton Heston. Is Moses. So that is our godly hero du jour. And just asking our typical question, what comes to mind when you think of Moses? What are some of the stories that come to mind?
The Red Sea crossing.
The Red Sea crossing.
10 Commandments.
Pretty important. The Ten Commandments, the movie or the event? The Ten Commandments. I'm afraid for some of us in this, the chariot race in Ben-Hur. That's right. Yes. No. That's Charlton Heston. Okay. That was what Moses did later in life. But anything else about? Let me see. What's the Moses? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It has its moments. Yeah. Yeah.
They get something or better not do. I mean, they get something, some lesson to what the Bible is.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a good thing.
I can never. The only thing about that old movie is bless his heart, Edward G. Robinson. When they discover that his they'd put the blood over his door. Wah! And just that reaction. I'm thinking, okay, he must not have been a great day. Scott. That he didn't make it into the land of Canaan. Yeah. Yeah. And boy, that's I thought about going there today because that's a real head scratcher, isn't it? On several levels. I mean, the idea of him striking the rock when he'd been told to speak to the rock, and God saying, "You didn't listen to me." And I'm thinking, that's just after all Moses has been through, and there's a part of you that goes, "Boy, God," but then there's a part of you going, "Moses, hadn't you learned something over the last little while?" What else? Yeah, Billy? Sure. Well, that's cool. It was indeed yes. Cecil B. DeMille. He knew how to put on a show. Anything else you remember about Prince of Egypt? That's kind of something that we tend to, kind of focus in on the idea that he was raised in luxury. It's kind of interesting if you look back in Exodus, and you might as well turn there because we'll be there for a little while today. But you go back to Exodus, and you've got this incredible story beginning in verse 22 of chapter 1, where Pharaoh, and by the way, is Pharaoh a personal name?
No.
Yeah, it's a title, okay, and we'll come to that in a minute. Now, Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. And then the story continues about a man from the house of Levi marrying a Levite woman, and she conceived and bore a son. She saw that he was a fine baby, so she hid him for 3 months. And I wonder how she did that. If he must have been a very quiet baby. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him, plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. What's the significance of it being among the reeds? Hiding. And no current, right? You're not in a part of where, so it's not gonna float away. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. While her attendants walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrews' children, she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" That's pretty savvy thinking.
Yes.
Pretty savvy thinking. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. Did you catch that? Moses' mother is being paid to nurse him. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." Now, interesting thing about that, as you look at it, where did Moses grow up? With his family, among his people. I think we often miss that. I think I grew up thinking, Moses in the basket, and Pharaoh's daughter takes him, and then he lives in the palace. It says when he had grown up, she took him, and this was not unusual throughout the ancient world of adopting someone who someone else basically has raised. This notion that he grew up in luxury, though, is not necessarily the case. It does make for great movies, though. What got him in trouble in Egypt? Anybody remember that?
Do we know about how old that was? I've never even thought about that.
It's interesting when he had grown up. I think the King James Version, if any of you have that with you, said when he was weaned. But it's actually the terminology is a little bit different. My guess is, because people aged into responsibility a lot sooner than we have in our culture over even the last couple of centuries. My guess is he was probably a teenager, early teenager. But that's just a guess, sheer unadulterated guess. Killed an Egyptian. Why did he kill the Egyptian? Okay, he saw someone beating one of the Hebrews. And because Moses has been adopted, my guess is about the time he would have be beginning to be sent into the work aspect of it. He sees someone who could have been a contemporary being beaten by one of the taskmasters, and he kills that person. Actually, it's the next day that he gets upset because he sees two Hebrews fighting together, and he tries to break them up, and one of them says, "Are you going to kill me the way you did the Egyptian?" So he realizes what? People know about this. So he flees to Midian. There he gets married. You got what else do you remember about Moses? Anything else we remember? tending sheep. What happens one day while he's tending sheep? Burning bush. His brother ends up helping him out. Okay. It's interesting. We haven't hit everything in his life, but fairly interesting life. The way the text breaks it down, there are three distinct movements in his life. This early life, in which he seems to be under some special level of protection, okay? But then there is a period of time in which he is, and I'll put the word in scare quotes, in exile in Midian. And then the third movement of his life is he is the leader selected by God, leader of God's people. All of that takes place between Exodus chapter 2, where Moses is born, all the way, Moses is a character all the way through the rest of Exodus, all the way through Leviticus, all the way through Numbers, to just about the end of Deuteronomy. That's a huge amount of material. It's a huge amount of material. I don't know that it ever says he wrote them, They're certainly referred to as the books of Moses, but kind of like all the Psalms that say a Psalm of David, the Hebrew word there doesn't necessarily imply authorship as much as it's about or has something to do with that person. And certainly you can't have Exodus through Deuteronomy without Moses as a character. You've got this huge amount of material, so we're just going to concentrate on two events that I think illustrate kind of where Moses as a godly hero kind of has something to teach us. I want to concentrate on these two events and then a little part of his prehistory. So first, the prehistory. If you go back to Exodus chapter 1, so Moses not on the scene yet, right? But start about verse 15. It says, the king of Egypt, what's the other terminology for king of Egypt? Pharaoh. King of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, kill him. But if it is his daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because of the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So you've got this interesting story in here. By the way, this notion of Moses as the Prince of Egypt, this is the movie this generation doesn't watch. But your kids, maybe, your grandkids certainly, Prince of Egypt, cartoon version. And it's been adapted into, and it's very much this notion of Moses and the person who became Pharaoh were reared together, which is a great story. Except that's not how the Egyptians did things. But it's a great story. So, just be a little concerned. It's interesting, though, that when we talk about this text here in Exodus 1, 15 through 21, little backstory before Moses is born, it's interesting, Shiphrah and Puah, and this risky civil disobedience that they do. Here's the thing, who in this story gets a name? The midwives. Who does not get a name? Pharaoh. And people have been arguing since as to, well, which Pharaoh is this? Even trying to figure out which dynasty it is, let alone which specific Pharaoh. But in the story, who gets named? The midwives who did what? Said feared God. And this is a great point because, again, we think, they were so afraid of God that their fear of Pharaoh was overcome. Always, 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 when it is said in parallel, it's not in these cases. That is true. But go to the Psalms, go to Proverbs, go to a lot of stuff in the prophets. Fear of God is not about cowering in a corner, afraid God is going to throw a lightning bolt at you. That is not fear of God. It is always set parallel to obedience to God. And I think that's how we should hear this notion that they decide, no, that's not in tune with what we know about God. So we're not going to do that. So who are they choosing? Over the power of the empire, over the power represented by the Pharaoh. And so I just find that fascinating that when God writes the story, it's not the Pharaoh who is named, it's these women who were obedient, who said, that's not what we're going to do. So a little bit of prehistory there. So you've already how you do or do not respond to God's call on your life. And so that takes us to Moses' call. We get into Exodus chapter 3. And you've got this wonderful story. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, at this point, I don't know if folks are calling it the mountain of God, but it certainly is going to become the mountain upon which God appears to Moses and then later to the whole people. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you're standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Now, Moses has been in exile for a long time, right? He's maybe kind of been beaten down, at least in terms of his sense of self. Then the Lord said, picking up with verse 7, I've observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of Israel, of the Israelites, has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. Moses has got to be thinking, so far, so good. This is great. God is going to do something. In my own unwashed way, I tried to do something about it many years ago, and that's why I end up in exile. Maybe that's why God is saying, hey, what you were in a literal sense fighting for decades ago, I'm now doing something about. All sounds good. It all sounds great. And then we get to verse 10. Now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. It's great when God acts. It's great when God does something spectacular in this world, but I'd rather He not ask me to do the heavy lifting. And that's where Moses is. Well, now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And he said, I will be with you. This shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Now, wait. Okay, go do this, and here's how you know that you can trust me, is that when you've brought them out of Egypt, you'll come back here. That's like the old Steve Martin thing about how to make $1 million a year and never pay taxes. First, make $1 million. Second, it's like God is going, once you brought them out of Egypt, then you'll come back here. It's what kind of a promise is that? It's actually going to be a pretty amazing one when it is fulfilled. But here on the front end, you think Moses is going, oh, well, that just gives me lots of confidence. Once you brought the people, once you've gone toe-to-toe with the most powerful person on the face of the earth as far as you know, then come on back here and you'll know I'm telling you the truth. So Moses gets this call from God, but his first response is, not me. Who am I to go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Because at this point, even though, however you want to figure this out, at one point he was connected to the household of the daughter of Pharaoh, but at this point, what is his job description? Shepherd in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so he is not someone who has street cred once he goes back to Egypt. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? No, I'll be with you and you'll make it back here. That's his first excuse. Don't send me, not me. But then I love how it goes on. What if they ask for your ID, God? What am I supposed to tell them? Moses said to God, if I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what's his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. First of all, I am who I am, or I am that I am, or I think some people say you can just boil that all down to, I just exist. I just am. What kind of identification is that? I think sometimes we think, now we get out of this when he said, just tell them I am sent me to you, that you get this notion of the YHWH, the tetragrammaton. Sometimes people say Yahweh as a way of saying this is, but even that, does that communicate a whole lot? I think there's something profoundly theological here, that you see who God is by seeing how God is, how he moves in this world, how he acts in this world. But at this point, is that going to satisfy an Egyptian going, Moses, what were you smoking out there in the desert? No. Oh, no, I am sent me. Yeah. Good one, Moses. God also said to Moses, thus you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations. Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I've given heed to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. I declare that I will bring you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of all the ites. Okay, so Moses is to go and meet with the leaders of the people and tell them, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has sent me. Now, we think, okay, not much of an ID, but wait a minute. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob were all holders of a promise. And so by bringing up those names, it's almost as if God is saying, the God who made those promises is getting ready to keep them. The God who made those promises is getting ready to keep them. Now, Moses, I think, next goes in a very interesting way. If we go down to chapter 4, verses 1 through 9, he sort of says, okay, that's great. Okay, you clearly are not listening to me when I say I'm not the person to do this. You really haven't given me much to ID you with to the people. So what if they don't believe me? Yeah, sure, if I show up and I talk to the leaders of the people, why should they believe me? Moses answered, but look, they may not believe me or listen to me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you. And the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake. Moses drew back from it. Wise man. Then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand. So that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. He put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, as white as snow. Then God said, put your hand back into your cloak. So he put his hand back into his cloak. Now, I just got to say, that's pretty gutsy on Moses' part. Okay? I put my hand in the cloak. The first time, I pull it out, and clearly I have some kind of a skin disease. Okay, put your hand back in your cloak. This is bad enough. We're not going for double, you know. But instead, he does what God says him to do. Says for him to do. I think that's pretty impressive, even at this point, as hesitant and reluctant Moses is. When he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you or heed the first sign, they may believe the second sign. If they will not believe even those two signs or listen to you, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. That sort of anticipates something, doesn't it? So, why me? Don't send me. Who knows who you are? May have been just heard a weird voice in the desert. Okay, what if they don't believe me when I say it's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? And then finally, my favorite, what if I get tongue-tied? But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh my Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you've spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue." Some scholars suggest that slow of tongue idea is perhaps a technical term for perhaps Moses had some kind of a speech impediment. That he's saying, I don't speak clearly. By the way, so did James Earl Jones. Probably one of the greatest voices in the history of voices. Just incredible. And in an interview one time, he mentioned that to the interviewer. I've dealt with a speech impediment my entire life. And she said, no, what? What are you talking about? He goes, right now I'm having difficulty forming the words. Yeah, so next time someone says they have a speech impediment, James Earl Jones, you know. Who that does public speaking would not die for his voice, you know, the voice of, because, you know, who is not going to respond if James Earl Jones offers the invitation, you know. I find your lack of faith disturbing. Anyway, verses, you know, going on, I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I'll be with you, with your mouth, and teach you what you are to speak. But he said, oh, my Lord, this is where he finally just kind of loses it. Please. And it's not actually in the Hebrew, but I think it's one of those, you know, please. Please send someone else. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, What of your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Even now he is coming out to meet you. Wait, did you catch that? Even now he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him. You're going to be the middleman, Moses. You're going to tell him what I'm telling you, and he can tell the others. Take in your hand this staff with which you shall perform these signs. Just send someone else. Nope. But I am sending you help. As a matter of fact, he's already on his way, which I find fascinating. Before God has ever, because it's not a long way from Egypt to Midian. So before God has ever had this conversation with Moses, Aaron's already on his way. Interesting that he says, take this staff with you, because there's a sense in which Moses and his staff are sort of related, because in a sense, Moses has his staff and uses that at significant moments in significant ways. His staff is a tool in his hand, and Moses becomes a tool in God's hands because he allows himself to. The power of Yahweh, the God of Israel, flows through them, and you kind of see this notion, particularly as we get into the second of these events in Moses' life. See that the staff becomes a character and part of what goes on. What God does with Moses and Moses with his staff there, you've got the 10 plagues, and those begin in Exodus 7. We won't look at all of them, but it's interesting. It's interesting if you read closely in these texts, like when the water of the Nile is turned to blood. It's interesting. Aaron is the one that seems to be in some ways sort of taking the lead. If you look in Exodus 7, just as a for instance here, with the staff that's in my hand, this is in the middle of verse 17, and with the staff that's in my hand, I will strike the water that's in the Nile, and it shall be turned to blood. Skip on down to verse 19. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt. Skipping on down, so that they may become blood, and there shall be blood throughout the whole land of Egypt. So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded. It's Aaron that stretches out the staff. And then you got the frogs, the second plague. Again, it's Aaron that's sort of taking, I like to call it the agent of the bringing of the plague. And then the gnats, the third plague, it's Aaron that sort of serves as the agent that gets things going. Then you got the flies, the fourth plague. It's actually, the text suggests that it's the Lord is the one that does this. Yahweh himself does this, is the agent that makes the plague come on. Again, with the livestock that are diseased, it is Yahweh that brings it about. But when we get to the boils, the sixth plague, all of a sudden it's Moses that tosses a handful of dust into the air, and as it dissipates into the air, it becomes boils on the skin of the people. And then when you've got the seventh, the thunder and hailstorms, chapter 9, verse 22, the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven so that hail may fall on the whole land of Egypt. And then with the locusts, the eighth plague, again, chapter 10, verse 12, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt so that the locusts may come upon it and eat every plant. And then in the ninth plague, the darkness, then the Lord said, verse 21 of chapter 10, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven so that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt. Anyone ever been on the tour to Mammoth Cave, and you get down in the middle of, and they turn out all the lights, and you just kind of feel the darkness. It's not just an absence of light. It's really kind of interesting. So what's interesting is, through the first 9 plagues, now the 10th plague, which is the death of the firstborn, again, it is Yahweh, it is God who initiates this. But it started out with the plagues. It's almost as if Moses is kind of, oh, okay, Aaron, you know, why don't you do? Is he still afraid that maybe it's not going to work? I don't know. But I feel like, and I hope I'm not reading into this, I feel like as you see the plagues progress, there's this growing confidence in Moses that, oh my goodness, Yahweh's really doing this stuff. And so much as the Egyptians are starting to say, well, we cannot push back against this God of the Hebrews, that Moses' confidence is going, and by the time we get to the boils, it's like, okay, I'll take it from here, Aaron. Again, I don't want to read too much into that, but it seems to me like kind of hidden in the text here, you see this growing confidence. His trust in God is growing as he sees God at work. Seems like there was something else I wanted to say about that. But we'll move on, and if it occurs to me, we'll back up and act like nothing happened. Finally, want to go all the way to the end and think about the book of Deuteronomy. And I know we are jumping over a lot of historical stuff, but there's something interesting happening here in Deuteronomy that I think gives us some sense of how Moses becomes a godly hero, someone who puts God's power on display in his life. He literally gets to do some of these things as God makes him an agent of his power there in the plagues. Oh, I know what it was about the plagues. Sorry, I remembered it. And I didn't make a note of it because I knew I would never forget. One of the things that's interesting is each of these plagues, there is an Egyptian god that can be directly connected to each of these plagues. So it's not just random. Oh, let's go with, I don't know, what are we going to do today? Oh, gnats. No. It's like each one of these things, it's a very much a sense of, here is an animal or, you know, a function or something of that nature that represents a specific Egyptian god. And the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh, shows, I got power over that, not your God. And so, again, I think that contributes to Moses' growing confidence in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So again, now we'll move on to Deuteronomy, okay? So Deuteronomy is interesting. In this book, Moses is passing on some information to the people. What is it that he passes on to them? What's he trying to tell them? Part of the clue might be in the name. It's a combination of two Greek words, deuteros and nomos, second law. There's also another clue on the calendar, you might say, in that Moses is talking to the people about these things and reiterating the law, the things that have been said back in Exodus and in Leviticus, and highlighting certain things. He's doing this to them right before they enter the promised land. This is at the end of the 40 years wandering. He is reminding them, he is refreshing their sense of what God is calling them to be as his people. He's getting them ready to actually live out these things as they enter the land. Now, an interesting snippet for our purposes is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 13. And some of this is going to sound incredibly familiar because I have found that many of the most familiar Bible verses sound like we've heard them before. And this is one of them. Deuteronomy chapter 6, we'll begin in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you're at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand, fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When the Lord your God has brought you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, where have we heard that before? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I swore to them. Or what's another word we might use? Promised them. The promise is coming true. When the Lord has brought you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, a land with fine, large cities that you did not build, houses filled with all sorts of goods that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you have eaten your fill, take care that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. The Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name alone you shall swear. Moses puts God's people, all of that, and Jesus will say this is a summary, almost like he's summarizing all of this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your might. We might boil that down, with all your being. If you're loving God, if you are seeking to be connected relationally to him, you're thinking about your relationship with him all the time. That's what it means. Recite this to your children, bind them as a sign on your hand, fix them as an emblem on your forehead, write them on the doorposts and on your gates. And look, don't even let the creature comforts of the new land you're going to be in, do not let that distract you from this ultimate relationship that is at the center of who you are. So again, I think that's interesting that Moses, as he speaks to the people, puts everything he's telling them about how to be God's people in this context of loving obedience. And I wonder if that's what he learned over the course of his life. Was that this somehow, over time, this relationship with God became deeper and deeper. Now, we didn't get into it. We didn't want to push through all of that, and we may circle back at some point. But there are times when Moses actually, like Abraham before him, when Moses actually kind of has the guts in conversation with God to basically say, no, I don't think you want to do that. You think about the time of the golden calf. God says, I'll just start over with you, Moses. And Moses says, I don't think that's what you really want to do. Now, my theory on that is not that God is terrible and arbitrary, because I've read about Jesus, and that God was just going to blow things up, but that in a sense, that conversation shows how far Moses has come in his relationship with God, that now he knows God's character to the point that he can say, well, wait a minute, that's out of character with you. That's out of character. And I just wonder if we see this as Moses moves through this relationship with God that is transformative for Moses. One little way that transformation can be seen. Remember what one of the excuses was when Moses said, "Not me," because what was the second to last before he just said, "Please do not take me"? What was the one before that? I'm not a good speaker. Don't make me. Don't make me. You know, I read one time where people's greatest fear is speaking in front of an audience, and that below that on the ranking is death. And so a speech teacher friend of mine said, people would rather die than give a speech, you know. And Moses was apparently really that way. But what's the format of the book of Deuteronomy? It's a set of speeches Moses gives to the people. So that decades earlier, where he says, "Do not, above all else, God, you do not want me to be the speaker. Don't make me be the speaker." By the end of his life, he's talking to these folks for hours on end. This speech is from the man who said he couldn't talk. And yet, it's what interesting is, as he goes through Deuteronomy, he's basically saying, look, folks, whether you believe me or not, this is what I need to say about God. This is what I need to say about God. And how different that is from Exodus 3. So, how is Moses a godly hero by our definition? Someone whose life is showing God's power at work. Someone who's making themselves available for God's power to be at work. What do you think, Danny? That's a good way to put it. Qualifies the chosen. Yeah, it's good. So Moses and godly hero. How does he put that on? Or maybe another way to put it is, what do we learn about being a godly hero from Moses? What do you think, Minta? So that that's good. This notion of him preserving in the best sense of the word, preserving the tradition. Yeah. Anything else?
Just letting God work through him.
Yeah. His willingness to be. I think that's really big, Keith. Just the notion that as you look at the story of Moses, as you look at him and walk through all of this material, I think you can see that he is growing in that relationship. He is not, his willingness to be used by God, because he didn't want, Exodus 3 and 4 make it pretty clear he didn't want to do it, but I'm feeling coerced into doing it. And then like this notion then that is staying in that relationship is transformative to him over time. I think most of us, I think many of us get to a point in our development that we just want to coast. Just want to coast on in. I ran out of gas a long time ago, but fortunately, praise God, we're going downhill. And it's like, I don't think that, you see Moses, I think Moses, even after he loses the chance to go into the promised land, Moses continues to grow in that relationship. So that even at the plains of Moab, the book of Deuteronomy, he's talking to the people, this is what I've learned about God. And it's relational. All right. Well, next week we'll come up with another godly hero that may give us some notion about how we can be people that God works in and through. So thanks for being here. I kept you over time, so you've only got 14 minutes to make it to the auditorium now.